I told CJ, I said, it's funny because the money disappears almost as quickly as it comes in, pretty much all across the board. Now that we have 3 kids, it's like you got to pay your mortgage, you got to pay, school tuition, you got to pay this. So it's like, all right, I get paid once a month. And pretty much the minute the money comes in, it all pretty much just goes right back out. And it's like, all right, now time to go back to work. Let's make some more, it's just so much going on. It just goes where it needs to go. And that's just crazy.
Do you sometimes feel that way with your money? Today, Allison and CJ share the finances of being a physician. Welcome to the Couple Money Podcast, the show where we share stories and advice on building up your marriage and wealth together. I'm Elle Martinez. Support for this podcast comes from Jumpstart Your Marriage and Your Money Masterclass. This course is designed to help you two get on the same page with money, dump your debt faster, and get you on the path to financial freedom. Sign up for the class today and get lifetime access. Just head over to couplemoney.com/jumpstart. Hey, I hope this week is treating you right. So after listening to Allison describe how she feels about their finances and then finding out she's a physician, were you a bit surprised? I have to be honest. A few years ago, when we were trying to dig out of debt, I thought things would be so much easier if we had a healthy income. And yes, having a certain amount does make a big difference, but that's only part of the equation. It's how you spend it that really matters. Are you saving, paying down debt? What are you doing with your finances as a whole? So in today's episode, we're going to hear from Allison and CJ on how they handle their finances. CJ is the creator of Dads Married to Doctors, and Allison is an ER physician. But this episode is going to be a little different because I have a guest host. My buddy Ryan Inman from Physician Wealth Services is going to be interviewing them for 2 very important reasons. One, this week I'm going out of town and spending time with my family. As you know, I do believe finances are important, but only in regards to how it can help you guys take care of your big goals together. One of our goals this year is to take family trips, reset, recharge every so often. So that's what I'm going to do. But I've also invited Ryan because he is the expert, not only as a financial planner in a professional sense, but he's married to a physician. And so he has intimate knowledge of the unique challenges that come in that situation. But in general, with those couples that are earning high income, they typically have some struggles, high debt. So as you're listening to this episode, see how this fits your situation. Are there ways that you can handle your finances in a responsible way? Yes, pay down the debt, grow your net worth, but then also balance it out with living life. Sometimes when you go full throttle on paying off the debt, you can lose focus and it gets unsustainable. You're discouraged and you quit. And I don't want that to happen to you. So how do you find that balance? How do you take care of your finances now, prepare for the future while still having some fun? I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Curtis and Allison, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Of course. So for those of you that don't know, Curtis is a stay-at-home dad, right?
Right, a work-from-home dad, part-time.
Perfect. And Allison is a ER physician. And I'd like, Allison, if you could, can you tell us by kind of starting off, what's the process of becoming a doctor? What was your journey?
So I'll say this, it was pretty intense. I went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill for both undergrad and medical school. And I always say it's funny, back in undergrad, I had classes from 9 to noon. I was like, man, that was a tough day. I'm gonna go take a nap. And it was pretty great. But medical school, it's like a job. You're in class from 8 to 4 plus hours of studying afterwards. My classmates were like, oh, I'm in bed at 9 o'clock. And I'm like, really? I'm only in my 20s. I don't go to bed that early. So it was pretty intense being in medical school. Residency was even more so, 70 to 80-hour work weeks. I was an ER resident, so we work shifts, but I always had to dictate afterwards. So I walked around on the phone all the time. I think I looked like I was some important business person. My daughter used to walk around on her toy phone saying, "This is Dr. Allison Webster dictating ED chart on this person."
That's
so
amazing.
it was hilarious. I was like, yeah, maybe I'm dictating at home too much. And now that I've graduated or, completed residency as an attending, the hours are definitely much better. But, we now have 3 kids instead of the one that I had in residency. So I've traded hours at work for probably just more intense hours at home. I mean, the workload is still pretty busy. I'm still, once I get to work, people say, "Don't you get a chance to just sit and relax? You work nights." And I'm like, no, people are always there in the ER. It's always busy from the minute you get there till the minute you leave. So, I mean, that's the process. I mean, it's just a lot of time put in, lots of hours put in, until I guess you get home. So,
Yeah. And most people don't know maybe what a lot of hours would look like. What is a typical shift for you? Just to kind of put it in perspective for everyone who might not be familiar.
I mean, like I said, I work in the emergency room. So, I mean, we take all comers, we see all comers. So the minute I come in, I have 2, 3, 4 patients waiting to be seen. And pretty much it's going in, seeing patients, ordering tests, just back and forth all night long, trying to get in, talk to people, that kind of stuff. So, obviously sick people, you get procedures. So, whether that's doing an intubation, doing stitches, anything like that. And like I said, it's just pretty much constant all night long until 7 o'clock comes and you tag your relief and you say, "You're it, I'm gone." And that's kind of pretty much what you do. And then obviously documenting. So, doing your charting and all those kinds of things. A lot of people say, "You've just been sitting there." And I'm like, well, yes, because I have to actually dictate or document what I've done with you all night long. So,
And Ryan, also on the hours side, as she mentioned, when she was in residency, it was like 20, 21, 22 shifts a month. And then when she got out of residency and then took a full-time job, it only dropped down to about 16 9-hour shifts a month. But those 9-hour shifts are really more like 12-hour shifts, and it can fluctuate. Sometimes it was a little bit more than 16. Now that she's about 5 years out, it's sometimes a little bit less than 16 shifts a month.
Yeah. And that's the hard part to realize because, I go to the doctor and maybe not the ER, but I go to the doctor and sometimes they only have like 10 minutes for you. And you're like, what are you doing the rest of the time? But there's such a patient load and, you can only spend so much time. So I appreciate you kind of letting us into that journey there. And, Curtis, while, Allison's off being this rock star doctor, what's the other side of this been like? What's the other side of the journey?
Yeah, great question, Ryan. It was intense. To use her words, it was intense on both sides. Seeing the sacrifice that she's making and the struggle with not only learning things during medical school, but also the hours that she was away, and then the same thing through residency, and even now as an attending. But on my side, just trying to fill in the gaps. I tell people all the time, 2 things: I'm a connector and I'm a gap filler. So there were times, for instance, when we were in residency in upstate New York, I would take the girls to church or take them out to a social event and say, "Oh, yep, Allison couldn't make it." But the couple times she didn't make it, they're like, "Oh, you're that mythical person, the girl's mother that we don't see all that often." And so it was definitely hard. There were times where I had to, like, for instance, now I only work a few hours a week part-time while she's an attending because I need to fill in the gaps here at home. But during medical school and residency, I was working full-time. So I had to figure out how to fit 40 hours a week and a full-time income while also juggling 1 kid in medical school, 2 kids in residency, and now 3 kids as an attending. So it has been intense. It's been a juggling act.
Yeah. No, and I relate to it. And for everyone listening, I'm also married to a physician, and while my wife doesn't work in the ER, she does pediatric pulmonology, and it's not as grueling or intense. There are a lot of gaps, and there's a lot of things that you do need to fill in during that time. And I appreciate you guys both laying it all out here for everyone to kind of understand a little bit of the back history. So let's kind of jump into the money side of it here. And Allison, what is the most difficult for you, with respects to money?
So I told CJ, I said, it's funny because the money disappears almost as quickly as it comes in, pretty much all across the board, now that we have 3 kids, it's like you got to pay your mortgage, you got to pay, school tuition, you got to pay this. So it's like, all right, I get paid once a month. And pretty much the minute the money comes in, it all pretty much just goes right back out. And it's like, all right, now time to go back to work. Let's make some more, it's just so much going on. It just goes where it needs to go. And that's just crazy.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because everybody naturally thinks being a doctor, being in a physician family, that there's money all over the place. You're going to have the fancy cars. They would think for me that I'm going to be sitting at home eating bonbons, and so on and so forth. And that is not always the lifestyle, especially the first few years out when you have that immediate debt load to start hitting you that you're responsible for.
Yeah, you're not just home eating bonbons with your feet kicked up and 2 nannies. What?
He eats bourbon balls instead.
Nice.
This is true. I do have a few bourbon balls instead.
Nice. I love it. So, Curtis, I'm going to kind of go back to you here with the same question. And one thing I will kind of state before I want your answer is, the typical debt load of a physician. So you guys don't have to tell me yours like on air, but I'm more than happy to share my story a little bit. My wife had mostly scholarships for undergrad. She went to in-state medical school. She basically lived at home for the entire time. It was a rental property that her parents had that they basically just let her pay the taxes on it and called it a day because they've owned it free and clear for a long time. She did everything that she could to make it cheap, and she still finished when we ended up refinancing with $180,000. My typical client has $285,000 of debt. So the debt load that physicians come out with, you think, yeah, maybe they're going to make $200,000 or $300,000. Sounds like an amazing salary. But then when you have that much or more in debt, when you, without kids, without a house, without any of it, it does make it a little more difficult. So,
that's right.
I just wanted to kind of clarify that as we, from your previous comment, but, getting back to this, what is the most difficult for you with respects to money?
So, like you said, Ryan, it was amazing. As soon as we finished and we were all excited because Allison got her first real check. And then as soon as she got that real check, then the government came, or the folks that gave the loans during medical school came knocking on the door like, hey, we now need to do income-based repayment. And then they showed us the big old crazy 4-digit number that they wanted us to pay. And so that was intense. That was crazy. But something that's kind of been the most difficult, I did not come from a background of knowing a lot about finances. I didn't come from a background of very good money management. So literally from childhood, my whole family, I was raised with the mindset of out of sight, out of mind. Allison used to joke with me about, I would get letters and bills to the apartment. This is when we were living separate. And she's like, hey, Curtis, these envelopes are changing colors. That's a problem, right? And I'm like, well, hey, nobody's knocking on my door, so it's all right. But so I brought very bad money management habits into the marriage, and so for me it was very much out of sight, out of mind. We set up a lot of bills on auto pay, and even though Allison and I have come up with various financial goals, a lot of times I don't go back and check in on those things because, like I said, out of sight, out of mind, and that was one of the most difficult things for me to begin to overcome.
Yeah, and I'm just curious because you referenced it. Do you guys write down actual goals, or is it just kind of you speak about goals and then?
So I think I write out goals and I give them to CJ, and sometimes he'll say, oh, I'll put that on the computer. I'll get to it. And it may or may not occur depending on what else is going on in life at that time.
Gotcha.
So Ryan, something we did learn, we were actually just listening to the conversation between you and Elle on the Financial Residency podcast. And I was telling her, hey, dear, yesterday when we were driving to the zoo, we had a money date. You didn't even know this, and I didn't invite you to it, but we actually had a money date where we were talking about our goals. And for the first time, unlike what we used to do where we would pull out the computer and the spreadsheets and start going through the numbers and crunching them. I'm like, hey, dear, I'm going to pay bills right here in front of you. Let's talk. We actually talked about our dreams and our goals and what we actually are trying to accomplish. So, hey, maybe we can look at some areas where we can make some sacrifices and change some of our money habits because now we know what we're trying to work towards. That's
beautiful. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to work. And, Elle does a amazing job with, describing the money date. And, so for those listening, maybe Elle can put it in the show notes for everyone to go back and listen to. But, then I kind of coined the phrase, financially frisky with your spouse. So hopefully that wasn't happening as you guys were getting, driving to the zoo. But, I think that's amazing. You guys are chatting on that. And it kind of brings me to the next question here that I have is, now that money is starting to come in, and I know that at the beginning, it's kind of a shock, bills get increased and student loans kind of come in and you're going, uh-oh. But as money has started to come in and, what are some of the things that maybe you have started to implement or change in the last few years?
So we say that we've started, and I'm making air quotes, living life. We kind of held off on doing a lot of things. Obviously in medical school and residency, we didn't have the time and we didn't have the money, but we bought our first house once I graduated. We had 2 kids at the time, ended up with a third. We've bought 2 cars since I've graduated. We now take regular vacations, and this is not just to see the grandparents, but we actually go to the Caribbean. We're going to Hawaii in a few weeks. So we've actually just started doing things and enjoying our life, not just, I always say life is for living, not just for working and, doing schedules. So that's what we've been really doing, is trying to enjoy ourselves and enjoy living our life.
And Curtis, kind of, do you want to chime in a little bit on that?
Yeah, along those same lines, we learned, and I don't know if anybody necessarily used the phrase while she was, in school and studying and everything, but it was the whole idea of delayed gratification. And some of it was during those times, like she said, we didn't have the time and we didn't have the money. Now that we do, we've just really been trying to focus on how can we still be fiscally responsible, but also, like you said, get financially frisky and enjoy some of the things, the fruits of those labor. All that time that she has been working hard, and both of us have been working hard and putting into setting ourselves up. How can we enjoy that, but also still keep our financial goals in sight?
Yeah, and that's something that's extremely common with physicians and maybe a little bit with other high income earning professionals like attorneys and things. You go through so much school, but physicians especially, you have so much training after. I remember my wife, every 4th night was sleeping in the hospital. I'd have a wife for 3 nights and then not on the 4th kind of thing. And it's a tough thing because you can't plan, you can't do anything. And so as you finish, it is important to make sure that, you're having conversations around what your ideal life would look like, what would make you happy. And, Curtis, I know we chatted previously on, is getting the kids involved. So I know you have 3 girls, and 2 of them are quite young, but your oldest, is probably at the time that, you can start chatting with her and having more real money conversations. And I'm just kind of curious. Like I know you'd said now you had a date on the way to the zoo, talking a money date. But how do conversations usually end up happening, around money in your house?
So we have a goal. Like I said, I do get paid monthly. So the goal was always once a month to check in with each other, talk about the bills, our budget, what are we doing going forth, kind of what is the next phase of our life look like. Unfortunately, though, like you said, with 3 kids and our kids are 9, 5, and almost 3, life gets in the way and we don't always get those. It seems to be probably more quarterly regarding as far as budgeting and bills, and are we on goal for hitting the things that we've talked about in the past. As far as day to day, I mean, we buy the things we need, we do the things, and then we kind of go from there. So that's typically how things go, although we're trying to get better about it.
And Ryan, it's interesting, too, when you talk about how to involve the kids in these conversations. Let me just give you a great example of how our kids have no understanding of money. I remember our oldest was at church one time and they were taking offerings. And she has such a big heart for other people. She had, I don't remember what it was, maybe $1 or a $5 bill in her purse to give out. And because her friend didn't have one, she ripped it in half and said, here you go. Here's, you can give this. And of course, everybody understood the heart of it. And that was amazing. And it was so great. But it's like, oh, that's no longer valid. You can't use that money.
Oh, hey, it's the thought that counts.
It is the thought. So that's been one of the interesting things. Our kids definitely kind of see the difference in the lifestyle. And so they feel like anything that pops up on TV, anything they see in the store, mommy, daddy, give me this. I want that. I want this. And so it has been interesting. And like you said, you and I had this conversation on our podcast episode that now, especially with the 9-year-old, but really with all 3 girls, we're trying to tie reward with work. We're trying to tie, what do we always say, choices and consequences. You know, the fact that money just doesn't come from anywhere. We work hard. We tell them the story. They see, mom, like since she works nights, a lot of times during the weekend when she's at home asleep, they see that she's sleeping because she has to go in to work hard. So we're trying to help them to understand that we do have to be financially responsible and what that can look like, not only for us, but also for them.
Yeah, that's great. So, Curtis, I think this will be fun. So I'm going to turn the tables here, and I'm going to let you kind of ask any question that you'd like to ask or get answered with respects to money. I think it'd be fun to flip the table here since I've been asking you guys so many questions.
Yeah. You want me to take this one? Well, so Ryan, I appreciate the opportunity, man. You have been such a I don't even say angel, lifesaver, breath of fresh air when it comes to understanding finances. A financial angel, right?
Yeah, sounds good.
Angel advisor, angel investor. But I say that because you and I have been able to have some conversations about finances to really help me to understand kind of the best ways for that management. So thank you for that and making yourself available as a resource.
Of course.
So one of the questions I've always been curious, is it actually possible to save for retirement while paying off this huge student debt load that we have?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. I tend to get asked that one a lot, and hopefully it resonates with some of the listeners here as they're thinking it's actually not physician specific, but we had talked about the student debt and how large that can become for physicians. So it might be a little harder to relate for others with that, but it really is a massive debt load. But I believe that you can definitely do both. Looking at it, there's a couple ways, and I think the best way to answer this would be yes, you can do both. It does take some discipline and dedication, and you wouldn't just pick one over the other. It's going to be basically a combination of both. So, as let's say Allison's working and her employer says, "Hey, Allison, we're going to match in your 401k or 403b, depending on where she works. Right. We're going to give you a match." And it's going to be, X% on X amount of contribution. That is basically 100% return on your money. It's basically like leaving part of your salary, if you will, on the table. So you're definitely going to want to contribute to get that match. Okay. Then I would look at it as if you have high interest debt, like credit card debt or personal loan. I know that we've chatted on some other stuff, but typically when I see someone that has some credit card debt or a personal loan, and it's, above, credit cards are close to 20%, sometimes even higher. Right. There's companies out there that will lend to you to consolidate that debt at a much lower percentage. Now it might be 7, 8, 9%, depending on your credit history and income and things like that. But I would be focusing on paying off all of that first, and then coming back to basically your retirement accounts. And this would be, filling out the 401k. This would be IRAs. This would be HSAs, and going with basically assets that are expected to have high returns. So you can think of as like the stock market. And then I would be more inclined to turn around and pay off moderate interest rates, debt on that. So like anywhere between, let's say, 4.5% and up to 7%. I would be basically going after that. And so you're kind of tearing down and you're kind of getting it together. So, when my wife finished with student debt, her average return or weighted average was close to 7% based on when she had borrowed. We refinanced at an extremely low rate. It was like 3%. And it went from a must pay off to, we're going to pay that off later. And I'm going to turn around and invest the difference. Instead of allocating more money, I'm just going to pay the minimum, invest the difference, and hope that over time my returns are high enough that could turn around and help pay down the student debt more aggressively. So that's kind of a cascading, like super high level, from a general standpoint. Again, I don't know the listeners and where their situation is, so don't take that as gospel. There's my financial advisor, like disclaimer, right? Right. But hopefully that helps you, and we can always chat more offline here on that if you have more questions.
Well, no, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that, because One of the things we first talked about, especially when she first came out of residency and started, like you said, getting the big checks, but also the big debt started coming in, or those big bills started coming in. We were just trying to figure out, like, maybe if we take a few years and don't put anything into retirement, maybe if we don't worry about those pre-tax buckets and so on and so forth, then that just gives us more money to put into knocking away at credit card debt or student debt and so on and so forth. And now you fast forward 5 years later and it's like, oh, we're still working on a lot of these different debts. So you know what? Maybe we should start thinking about socking some of that money away for retirement. So I like the fact that you mentioned you can kind of do both and at different levels throughout time.
Yeah, and you're looking at kind of expected returns versus like, what your actual like guaranteed interest rate is, right? You've locked it in. It's a fixed rate. It's a set amount. You know what it is. If it's 10%, 12, 15, 20% on a credit card, can you refinance it down and get it lower? Obviously, the credit card debt was there for a reason. Can you stop basically the potentially bad habits of getting into that, so you don't end up back in the same spot? And then, maxing out, investments and things like that, because expected return is higher than, let's say the 3% interest rate on your student loans that you refinanced. So it's kind of like you're looking at expected returns versus interest, and how does that necessarily play out? Some people are really debt adverse. They're like, I just need to get this done. Some people, and physicians tend to be in this crowd of, I've taken on so much. Why? Well, let's just add a house and a car and everything else because I have it. It's not going away. So I tend to see more of that side than the debt adverse side. But so I want to switch it just, to finish this kind of rounding out the interview here is, Allison, from a physician standpoint, I'm always really curious on this. What are one or two things that you wish you could tell your patients, whether it's about yourself or just being a physician in general, that you're really never able to, maybe discuss when they're in the ER, well, especially in the ER?
Well, I mean, I just say, as physicians, we're normal people. We're normal people with specialized knowledge and a specialized skill set, and we will find you. I'm just kidding.
I love that.
I tell people, I went into medicine because I care about people. I don't drive a fancy car. I drive a Hyundai Elantra. I don't go golfing. I don't do all these things. So I'm not doing tests to try to get your money. A lot of people say, oh, I never go to doctors. I hate doctors. And I'm like, why? I never met you before. I'm a nice person, so we're normal people. Talk to us like we're normal, speak to us like we're normal. Like CJ says, the people who come looking for specific drugs, no, I don't give antibiotics for viruses because, I don't want you to have adverse effects, where we care about our patients. And that's why we went into this, not because we're looking to be these rich people. Like you said, I'm in so much debt just being a doctor in general that it's not because I'm looking to, do something big. A lot of people say, oh, my OB did a hysterectomy on me because his wife needed a new fur coat. And I just kind of look at people like, do you really think that that's what doctors do? No, we do stuff to help you. But, like I said, we're just there trying to help people, trying to save lives, kick butt, take names. I'm just kidding.
No, exactly.
So yeah, That's what I'd say is just we're normal. We care about people. We want to take care of people. Treat us as such.
Yeah, I love that. And I see that on the flip side. Granted, my wife works with a lot of kids, but it's the parents that end up, sometimes she takes some verbal abuse and it's not, not really needed. It's one of those, like, we're trying, as she says, we're trying to help, we're trying to do the best thing. And I can tell you, like, physicians do not get into medicine for the money because you have such a delayed start. Most people get out of work or get out of college at 22, 23, and you start working and you're able to actually save money if you're doing it correctly right from the start at 22 years old. Most physicians get out and they're not saving. And these are ones that, like, maybe a little specialty, but not a crazy one like some surgeons, or interventional cardiologists, where they're in school for, like, I don't know, 2 more decades, it feels like,
exactly.
But they're not starting till they're in their early 30s or mid 30s. So there's, 10 years of earning potential and savings that they just don't have that they need to be compensated for. And it still takes them a long time with the debt load and everything. So I really appreciate, Allison, you saying that. And Curtis, to round it out here, Can you let
Yeah.
everyone know a little bit about the Dads Married to Doctors group and the movement you've really kind of started there?
Yeah, most definitely, Ryan. I appreciate you and Elle giving us this opportunity. And before I talk about DMD, let me just thank you both for what you've brought to the table. I've been listening to some of the Couple Money podcasts as well as some of your financial residency episodes, and just the idea of having a forum to learn about better money management habits, breaking bad habits, getting out of those cycles. Like you said, especially being in this physician cycle and physician family, you get so used to having debt, and you get so used to just taking on high debt loads and so on and so forth, that it's like, oh yeah, sure, we'll just go ahead and put on another credit card, and that's a lot to change and break out of. So to answer your question, the Dads Married to Doctors group is just a support community. It's literally as simple as that. I started up the community almost 4 years ago because when I was going through with my wife through medical school, through residency, being a dad married to an aspiring physician and now a current physician, there was a lot on my shoulders. There was a lot on her shoulders too. And there, my normal friends, my friends that weren't in a physician household didn't always understand. When I would show up to events and say, oh yeah, my wife can't make it. She's been in the hospital, for like the last 2 days, and now she's getting a little bit of sleep. They're like, oh, she can't come out and see us for a little bit. And they didn't understand. Or when I say, hey, I'm going to be I'd go to the daycare and say, hey, y'all call me. Whenever there's an issue, if I need to come pick up the kids, call me. They're sitting there calling my wife while she's sleeping. And I was like, no, you need to call me. I'm the primary caregiver. So a lot of society didn't understand what that looked like, being a dad married to a physician. So started up the group so that I could find a tribe, if you will, a group of like-minded guys that understood what we call the DMD lifestyle is all about.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I love
man.
it.
So
And
thank
I
you.
love being a part of it. And I appreciate everything you're doing for all of us that are married to physicians. So thank you so much, guys, for being on the show. I really appreciate your time. And hopefully, Allison, you can go get some sleep now.
Thank you. I will definitely try to do that.
Thanks for having us, Ryan and Elle.
Special thanks to everybody who was involved in this episode. I really appreciate the help. And if you want to hear more from Ryan, please check out his podcast, The Financial Residency. Or if you're in that situation, you're a physician family, and you want some help with your finances, please reach out to Ryan at Physician Wealth Services. He's a great guy, fantastic financial planner, and he puts his clients first. And also, if you are in the physician community and want some support, maybe bounce ideas with other people, please check out Curtis's community. It's called Dads Married to Doctors. They have a Facebook group. It's very supportive. I think you'll enjoy it. Don't worry, I'll include everything in the show notes. And if you want to stay on top of everything, the podcasts, videos, articles, make sure you're subscribed to the community. I send out weekly updates on Fridays with everything we release, as well as some behind the scene and exclusive stuff. Plus, it's free. Just head over to couplemoney.com/join. Our theme song was written and performed by Gentle Regime. Additional music by Lee Rosevear. And if you're interested in catching some behind the scenes stuff or want to reach out to me, I'm on Instagram at couplemoney. And finally, I want to say thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate you guys sharing your favorite episodes on social media. It helps get the word out on how money doesn't have to be a wedge in your marriage, but something that you guys can work on together. I hope you have a great week. Take care.